You're listening to a podcast from 702. 702.
Travel. Let us travel with Igor Mutilska, who is the editor of eagerjourneys.com. And today is quite an important conversation. And we are speaking about how the travel sector can be more inclusive for those traveling with neurodivergence. We take your calls on 011 883 0702 and the WhatsApp line 0727021702. If there are any stories or experiences that you would like to share or considerations as somebody living with a neurodivergence, or you have a loved one or a child and you want to say, hey, it would be so great if the travel industry could do this. Iga, welcome back to the show. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I'm so excited to be talking about this because, as you mentioned, it's such an important topic that we need to become aware of.
And yes, Autism Awareness Month is happening at the moment this April, and it is quite important to have some consideration, you know, when you aren't directly affected by things like neurodivergence, you will just take certain things for granted. So I think this is quite an important conversation.
Certainly, absolutely. And the travel sector is trying to make travel so much more accessible and inclusive. And first of all, I just want to mention there's some really great resources out there online, like autismsociety.org, autismspeaks.org, and right here in South Africa, we've got ought2know.co.za. That's AUT, the numeral 2, and KNOW.co.za. Those are really great resources for people to go and do some research about afterwards if they need.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. And we will repeat that website again before our conversation ends. So while we're on that, what are some of the misconceptions about autism spectrum disorder? Just so also, you know, for everybody to get a clearer picture before we bring in the travel sector into it.
Yes, so it's a developmental disability that is caused by differences in the brain. And as you mentioned, it's a spectrum. So as the saying goes, if you know one person with autism, you only know one person with autism, because everyone's experiences are very different. And it's not always as it is presented in popular culture or our perceived ideas of autism spectrum disorder. So very often individuals might have difficulties with, say, social communication or eye contact and interaction. They may have a different way of learning and moving and, of course, paying attention. And so children with autism, and adults indeed, you know, have sensitivities to smells and foods, loud noises, flashing lights. And so very often social situations may be difficult and anxiety-provoking for them. So I think it's so important to have considerations and accommodations just to help ease their everyday life, but particularly when they are traveling.
And I have to be honest, Iga, as you're speaking, I'm just thinking about every time I book a flight, what are some of the things that they ask me? You know, they'll ask, for example, do you require a wheelchair? And I just thought to myself, for all of the things that you've mentioned, the certain sensitivities, challenges with communication, could airlines and booking agents be doing more in regards to getting more information about the individual traveling?
Absolutely, they're doing just that. So I'm busy writing an article about this, and that's why I started researching it. And so one of the people that I've interviewed is Antoinette Turner, and she's the general manager at Flight Center. And so she was explaining to me how, you know, a travel agent can help you during the planning stages of your holiday. Because myself and maybe the average layman might not know what to do. And so a travel agent can help to take the burden off of parents. So it's recommended that parents communicate their children's specific needs, and they, of course, can factor this in and make those important considerations at the time of booking. They might also, for example, suggest service providers across the travel sector, so from transport to hotels and activities, you know, and different service providers that are able to make these accommodations for neurodivergent individuals. And of course, they can help to tailor the trip that's best suited to each individual. So I love how Antoinette explained that a travel agent can help to family seated in an area of the aircraft where there are fewer passengers, like the bulky.
Yes.
They can also organize priority boarding and disembarkation. They can also submit this request directly to the airline and manage it on your behalf. So you don't have to, as a parent, go and be stressed out by doing all of this by yourself. And I think one of the other virtues of having a travel agent is they can suggest autism-friendly hotels, for example, or maybe self-catering accommodation rather than big hotels where the environment is controlled and much more predictable. They can also maybe help book you into a quieter part of the hotel where there isn't as much foot traffic. They can possibly help organize in-room dining or golf court transfers, and sometimes generally there would be an additional cost for that. But I think if you have the help of a travel agent, that can really, truly help. And I think something else that was really interesting is they can help potentially book experiences to galleries and museums or theme parks and aquariums before they open or after they're closed to the public. There are some accommodations in certain instances, and of course a travel agent would have that kind of like insider information and can help communicate those various needs.
And what you're raising, I think, is so critical. And as you're speaking, I'm just thinking to myself, that's what makes this conversation so important, because outside of the travel industry, doing what they can to make accommodations for everybody that can assist everybody, it's the travelers that sometimes are the problem. And if, for example, we're speaking now about neurodivergence, we have so many people that have issues with, for example, somebody flying with a baby or flying with a child. We see the videos circling. So do you think, Igor, just from your own experience, that travelers are a lot more generous and understanding than what we give credit for, and maybe the few instances where people get annoyed are more rare?
I would very much certainly hope so. And I think, to a certain extent, popular culture and TV shows like Love on the Spectrum or Atypical are certainly helping educate and make us much more aware of how diverse neurodivergence is. As I mentioned, everyone is different and everyone needs different accommodations. And so I think people are certainly becoming so much more open-minded. And I think it's just about being a good human.
Literally.
Trying to be accommodating and trying to help wherever much you can, and also educating yourself.
Yes.
And thankfully, international airports are following that trend as well. Many of them are doing away with boarding calls over the intercom system. And for example, you might have an airport staff usher you and your family through terminals and security and passport control much faster without having to stand in a queue. There's this really great initiative called the Sunflower Scheme. It's in various airports around the world. As far as I know, it hasn't touched base in Africa or South Africa yet. I'm certainly hoping that's what's going to happen in the future. But essentially the scheme helps to identify passengers with these so-called hidden disabilities by asking them to wear a green lanyard with sunflowers around their neck. And this just helps airport staff provide appropriate assistance and support.
Yes.
And of course, we need more training within the industry.
So can you maybe just share a little bit more about what you're sharing about hidden disabilities? Obviously, not everybody will necessarily disclose. What should we be aware of? As in, it's not something you will see immediately, but should certain things happen or certain things be triggered, then you'll become aware of it.
Certainly. So some people might wear a badge, for example, that shows, there are different symbols that show like puzzle pieces or kind of a colorful infinity sign. They might have a green lanyard. Perhaps maybe they have a label or a tag that says I'm neurodivergent. And again, some people might be nonverbal, or they might be verbal on certain days, and if they feel very overwhelmed and overstimulated, they might struggle to speak. So they might also have flashcards, for example, or they might type a message on a device or on their phone. So I think it's just being accommodating, just being aware, I think. And something that is really very helpful is to see that many different restaurants, hotels, airports are also using visuals, like maps and arrows and signs and photos, to kind of help support individuals with ASD. And of course, there's some training that's happening as well, especially internationally, but hopefully in South Africa too, where people are training their staff members to be much more aware of how to react, to give them hands-on autism training, and to incorporate like low sensory areas into their spaces, where the lights might be dimmer, where there might not be as much decor, for example, where there aren't any flashing lights. And so we're slowly but surely, I think, making really good strides in that regard.
And I'm just wondering, is there maybe even a possibility of some of the apps that, I think, for example, the Dubai airport has an amazing app just to help you navigate. Do you think some of these companies, be it airlines or airports or travel agents, could maybe do something on their apps that can assist individuals?
100%, definitely. And your travel agent can also help connect you with airport staff who will come and whisk and usher you off, help you disembark sooner, ensure that you don't have to stand in long queues. And for many individuals, it's also a case of not necessarily wanting to be touched or be in close physical contact. So a security pat-down, for example, might be very stressful for them.
Yes.
So it's all about communicating that to them previously and making various adjustments. I think something that I would really recommend as well is for parents or guardians to prepare a one-page document that they can email to someone or that they can print out as well with all the information that states their child's diagnosis, what they might struggle with, any allergies or medication that they're on, any kind of other special information and how they might need help. And I think, with that kind of having that cue card, I think can be really helpful for individuals as well.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Iga Mothelska, for raising such an important issue. If you'd like more information on autism awareness, South Africa offers helpful advice and resources. Go to ought2know.co.za, and that's spelled AUT, the number 2, and the word know as in knowledge, KNOW.co.za. You can find more from Iga Mothelska on eagerjourneys.com.